My name is Emma Carter, and I'm 29 years old. I never imagined that checking my email would shatter my world completely. For weeks, I'd been eagerly waiting for my sister Charlotte's wedding invitation to arrive. When I finally saw her name in my inbox, my heart soared with excitement until I opened the message. Inside wasn't the beautiful digital invitation I expected, but a brief, cold email that read, "Hi Emma, hope you're well. Just wanted to let you know that our wedding ceremony will be a small, family-only event. We're keeping it intimate with just immediate family. Hope you understand. Love, Charlotte. Family only. But I am family. I'm her sister, her only sister." The realization hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't considered immediate family in Charlotte's new definition. This wasn't an invitation. It was a notification of my exclusion. A formal way of telling me I wasn't welcome at one of the most important days of my sister's life. Before I share how this devastating rejection led to the most life-changing journey I've ever taken, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button as I take you through this emotional roller coaster. Charlotte and I grew up inseparable in the suburbs of Chicago. She was 3 years older than me, and despite the age gap, we were each other's best friends and worst enemies, sometimes within the same hour. We shared a bedroom until I was 12, whispering secrets under blanket forts and planning elaborate pranks on our parents. Charlotte taught me how to braid my hair, helped me with my first heartbreak in 8th grade, and was the first person I called when I got accepted to Northwestern University. Our bond deepened after our parents' bitter divorce when I was 16 and Charlotte was 19. Mom and Dad's split was messy and prolonged, filled with lawyers, custody battles, and uncomfortable conversations about who we'd spend holidays with. While our parents were busy destroying each other, Charlotte stepped up as my protector and guide. She'd drive down from her college in Wisconsin every other weekend to check on me, bringing my favorite Thai takeout and letting me cry about the chaos at home. "We're a team, Em," she'd say, using the nickname only she was allowed to use. "No matter what happens with Mom and Dad, we'll always have each other." She was my maid of honor when I got engaged at 25, though that relationship didn't work out. When I started my marketing consulting business 2 years ago, Charlotte was my first client, insisting on paying full price despite my protests. When I moved into my own apartment in Lincoln Park, she helped me paint every room and assembled my entire kitchen table without complaining once. That's who we were to each other, constants in an ever-changing world, until Marcus entered the picture. Charlotte met Marcus 3 years ago at the prestigious consulting firm where they both worked in downtown Chicago. He was everything she'd always said she wanted: ambitious, well-educated, from a wealthy family, and devastatingly handsome. I remember her gushing about him during our weekly sister dinners, how impressed she was by his Harvard MBA, his family's vacation home in the Hamptons, and his 5-year plan to make partner. My first meeting with Marcus was at an upscale steakhouse in River North. I could immediately sense Charlotte's nervousness as she introduced us, constantly checking his reactions to everything I said. Marcus was polished and confident, wearing what was clearly an expensive suit and speaking in measured tones about his work and travels. When I mentioned my small but growing consulting business, he smiled condescendingly and said, "That's nice. Everyone needs hobbies." The comment stung, but Charlotte just laughed it off as his sense of humor. Throughout dinner, Marcus dominated conversations with stories about his connections in high society and name-dropped celebrities he'd supposedly met. When Charlotte and I tried to share childhood memories, he'd interrupt with his own stories or check his phone. I watched my confident, intelligent sister shrink into someone seeking his approval for every comment she made. The changes in Charlotte happened gradually, so slowly I almost didn't notice them at first. Our weekly sister dinners became monthly, then sporadic. When we did meet, she'd spend most of the time talking about Marcus's achievements or their weekend plans with his family. She stopped asking about my business, my dating life, or my dreams. It was as if the only version of herself that mattered was the one reflected in Marcus's eyes. I tried to maintain our connection through texts, birthday surprises, and invitations to events I thought she'd enjoy. Most attempts were met with polite but distant responses. "Can't make it, sorry. Marcus and I have plans." Rain check. We're visiting his parents this weekend. Sounds fun, but we're pretty busy with work stuff. Meanwhile, I was building my own life in Chicago. My consulting business was thriving. I'd made genuine friendships through a book club and hiking group, and I'd even started dating someone promising. My one-bedroom apartment became my sanctuary, filled with plants, art from local creators, and books that actually got read. I was proud of what I'd built independently. Yet something felt fundamentally missing without Charlotte's presence in my daily life. She'd been my sounding board, my biggest cheerleader, my partner in navigating family drama. Without that connection, holidays felt hollow and achievements felt incomplete. The last meaningful conversation we had was 8 months ago when she called to announce her engagement. Despite all the distance between us, genuine happiness flooded through me. "Charlotte, that's incredible," I exclaimed. "I'm so happy for you. Tell me everything. How did he propose?" For 20 minutes, she was my sister again, breathlessly describing the romantic proposal at their favorite restaurant, showing me the ring over FaceTime, talking about potential wedding dates. "I want you to be my maid of honor, she said, and I could hear tears in her voice. I can't imagine getting married without my sister by my side. I immediately started brainstorming bachelorette party ideas and offered to help with wedding planning in any way she needed. "I'd love to help with anything," I said eagerly. "I could design invitations, help with vendor research, whatever you need." There was a pause. "That's sweet of you," she said carefully, "but Marcus's mom is really involved in the planning, and she has very specific ideas about everything. She's hired this amazing wedding planner who handles all the high-end events in their social circle." Still, I held on to hope that the wedding would bring us closer. I imagined us getting ready together, sharing sisterly moments amid the chaos, dancing together at the reception, and reconnecting over this milestone. So when weeks passed without any wedding details or requests for my input, I waited patiently for my invitation. The day the email arrived started perfectly normal. It was a crisp October morning, and I was working from home, sipping coffee while reviewing proposals for new clients. My business had grown significantly over the past year, and I was feeling optimistic about everything. I'd even bought a new dress specifically for Charlotte's wedding, a beautiful emerald green number that I thought would photograph well. When I saw Charlotte's name in my inbox, my heart raced with anticipation. Finally, the invitation I'd been waiting for. I clicked it open eagerly, expecting to see elegant wedding details, venue information, and maybe a sweet personal note about how excited she was to have me as her maid of honor. Instead, there was that devastating message. "Family only." The words felt like a slap across the face. I read it 3 times, hoping I'd misunderstood, but there was no ambiguity. My own sister didn't consider me immediate family anymore. I immediately called her, my hands shaking as I dialed. It went straight to voicemail. "Charlotte, it's me. I got your email about the wedding being family only, and I'm really confused. I'm your sister. Can you please call me back?" My voice cracked on the last words. When she didn't call back within an hour, I texted her. "Got your email. Really hurt and confused. Can we talk?" The response came 20 minutes later. "Sorry, in meetings all day. It's just what Marcus's family wants. Small ceremony, you understand." Marcus's family wants. Not what Charlotte wanted, but what his family dictated. The distinction was crystal clear and incredibly painful. Unable to focus on work, I called our mom. "Oh, honey," she sighed when I explained the situation. I was hoping she'd change her mind about that. So she'd known. Everyone had known about my exclusion except me. "Are you going?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "I have to, Emma. She's my daughter, too." The words stung even more. Of course Mom would be there. Of course I was the only one being excluded from my sister's wedding. That evening, I scrolled through social media and discovered that Charlotte's college roommates, Marcus's work colleagues, and even distant family friends had received proper invitations weeks ago. Beautiful gold-embossed cards with all the wedding details, posted proudly on Instagram. I was the only significant person in Charlotte's life who'd been deliberately excluded. The knowledge settled in my chest like a lead weight. This wasn't about keeping the wedding small. It was about erasing me from Charlotte's new life to appease Marcus and his family's vision of who she should be. I spent the next few days in a fog, unable to concentrate on work, barely eating, and avoiding calls from friends who wanted to chat about weekend plans. My coworker and friend Jessica noticed my distress during our Monday morning coffee meeting. "You look terrible," she said bluntly. "What's going on?" "Family stuff," I replied automatically. The kind of family stuff that requires emergency chocolate and wine, or the kind that requires emergency vacation time? She asked, studying my face carefully. I almost laughed despite everything. Maybe both. Jessica leaned forward. "Emma, you've been working nonstop for 2 years building this business. When's the last time you took a real vacation? Not a long weekend, but actual time off." I couldn't remember. Between growing my client base and trying to maintain relationships that were clearly one-sided, I'd barely taken any personal time. I can't just disappear. My clients need me. Your clients will survive. You have contractors who can handle things temporarily. But you won't survive if you keep pushing yourself like this, especially when you're clearly dealing with something major. That night, I made an impulsive decision that would change everything. Instead of wallowing in hurt and rejection, I opened my laptop and started researching international destinations. New Zealand, Costa Rica, Iceland, places I'd always dreamed of visiting but had never prioritized. At 2 a.m., I booked a flight to Auckland, New Zealand, leaving in 4 days. The cost made me wince, but something about the spontaneity felt right. I would not spend Charlotte's wedding day sitting at home, scrolling through social media posts of the celebration I'd been excluded from. I would be halfway around the world, creating my own adventures. Packing was surprisingly therapeutic. I pulled out hiking boots I'd barely used, bought a quality backpack, and selected clothes suitable for New Zealand's spring weather. In my closet, I found a photo album filled with pictures of Charlotte and me throughout the years. Us at summer camp, at each other's graduations, at family holidays. I hesitated, then left it on the shelf. This journey wasn't about dwelling on the past. The morning of my departure, I felt a mixture of anxiety and exhilaration. For the first time in my adult life, I was doing something completely unplanned, completely for myself. If Charlotte could rewrite our relationship to exclude me, then perhaps I could rewrite my own story too. O'Hare Airport buzzed with the usual chaos of international departures. As I waited at my gate, I watched families saying goodbye, couples heading off on romantic getaways, and solo travelers like myself embarking on unknown adventures. A part of me couldn't believe I was actually doing this, flying to the other side of the world alone, with no concrete plans beyond a 2-week accommodation booking in Auckland. The 20-hour journey to New Zealand gave me plenty of time to think. Somewhere over the Pacific, wrapped in the anonymous darkness of a long-haul flight, I started writing in a journal I'd bought at the airport. Not about Charlotte or the wedding, but about myself. When had I last done something purely for adventure? When had I prioritized my own happiness over maintaining relationships that clearly weren't being reciprocated? Maybe there was truth in what was happening. Perhaps I had become too comfortable, too focused on preserving connections with people who no longer valued them equally. The painful exclusion from Charlotte's wedding might actually be the push I needed to stop defining myself through relationships with others and start discovering who I was on my own terms. Auckland greeted me with crisp spring air and stunning harbor views. After the claustrophobia of the long flight, the open spaces and clean air felt like a revelation. My accommodation was a boutique hostel in the Ponsonby neighborhood, known for its artsy vibe and excellent coffee culture. The private room was small but comfortable, with a window overlooking tree-lined streets that felt worlds away from Chicago's urban intensity. My first day was spent in a jet-lagged haze, wandering through the city center, marveling at the blend of Maori culture and modern city life. I found myself at the Auckland Art Gallery, losing hours in contemporary exhibitions that challenged my perspective and made me think about creativity in new ways. For the first time in months, I felt genuinely engaged with something that had nothing to do with work or family drama. That evening, I joined a group dinner organized by the hostel. Around the table sat travelers from Germany, Japan, Australia, and Canada, all with different reasons for being in New Zealand. When they asked about my story, I found myself being honest in a way I hadn't expected. "I'm here because my sister didn't invite me to her wedding," I said simply. Instead of feeling sorry for myself, I decided to have my own adventure. Rather than awkward sympathy, there was a moment of collective understanding. "Family can be the most hurtful," said Klaus, a German programmer taking a sabbatical. "My brother hasn't spoken to me in 2 years because I didn't take over the family business." "My sister and I have the same issue," added Yuki from Japan. "She thinks I'm wasting my life teaching English abroad instead of settling down in Tokyo." Sometimes the people who should support our dreams are the ones who judge them most harshly. Their perspectives offered a different lens through which to view my situation. These were people who'd chosen adventure over expectation, who'd prioritized personal growth over family approval. For the first time, I didn't feel like the victim of circumstances, but rather someone making a conscious choice to value herself. The next morning, Klaus mentioned he was joining a small group tour to Rotorua, known for its geothermal wonders and Maori cultural experiences. "There's space if you want to join," he offered. "It's just 4 of us, pretty laid back." My instinct was to decline, to maintain the solitude I'd planned. But wasn't breaking patterns the whole point of this journey? "I'd love to come," I heard myself say. The 2-day trip to Rotorua changed something fundamental in me. We visited bubbling hot springs, witnessed traditional Maori performances, and hiked through forests that felt ancient and mystical. Being part of a small group of travelers created an instant intimacy. We shared meals, stories, and moments of wonder at New Zealand's natural beauty. On our second evening, as we sat around a campfire at our eco-lodge, Yuki asked me directly, "Do you miss your sister? Or do you miss the idea of having the sister you thought you had?" The question hit me like a revelation. "I think I miss the sister I grew up with," I said slowly. "The one who existed before she decided I didn't fit into her new life." "Maybe that sister still exists," suggested Anna, the Canadian teacher in our group. "Maybe she's just lost right now, trying to be someone she thinks she should be instead of who she really is." "Or maybe," Klaus added gently, "she's become someone different, and you need to grieve the relationship you had so you could decide if you want a relationship with who she is now." Their insights, coming from people with no history or agenda, helped me see the situation with clarity I'd been lacking. I wasn't just hurt by the wedding exclusion. I was mourning the loss of a relationship that had been deteriorating for years. Back in Auckland, I made a decision that surprised me. Instead of cutting my trip short or wallowing in analysis, I extended my stay by another week and booked a solo hiking trip on the South Island. If I was going to rebuild my sense of self, I might as well do it somewhere breathtakingly beautiful. The flight to Queenstown revealed landscapes that looked like they belonged in fantasy movies, snow-capped mountains, pristine lakes, and valleys that stretched to the horizon. My accommodation was a small lodge near Lake Wanaka, surrounded by hiking trails of varying difficulty levels. For the first time in years, I had no schedule, no client calls, no family obligations. Just me, the mountains, and whatever pace felt right for each day. Some mornings I'd wake early for challenging hikes to mountain peaks. Other days I'd read by the lake, write in my journal, or simply sit in meditation-like silence, watching light change on the water. It was during one of these quiet moments that my phone buzzed with Charlotte's name. The wedding was happening today, and she was calling me. I stared at the screen, my heart racing, then made a conscious choice to let it go to voicemail. Later that evening, I listened to her message. "Emma, it's me." Her voice sounded strained, emotional. "I know today is my wedding day, and I know you're not here, and I wanted to hear your voice. I miss you. I miss my sister. I know I messed this up, and I don't know how to fix it. Call me back when you get this, okay? I love you." The message left me with a mixture of emotions. Vindication that she recognized her mistake, sadness that it took her wedding day to realize it, and uncertainty about what came next. But rather than calling back immediately, as the old Emma would have done, I decided to sit with these feelings for a while. The next morning, I tackled the most challenging hike I'd attempted, a full-day trek to the summit of Mount Roy. The physical exertion required complete focus, leaving no mental space for dwelling on family drama. At the summit, Surrounded by 360-degree views of lakes and mountains, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with anyone else's approval. It was there, literally and figuratively at a peak, that I made some important decisions about my future. I would finish my New Zealand adventure fully present, without rushing back to fix things with Charlotte. When I returned to Chicago, I would respond to her outreach, but on my terms, with clear boundaries about what I needed from our relationship going forward. My final week in New Zealand was spent exploring Wellington, the capital city, known for its art scene and coffee culture. I visited museums, attended a local theater production, and even took a cooking class focused on New Zealand cuisine. Each new experience added another layer to my growing sense of independence and confidence. On my last day, I found myself at Te Papa, the National Museum, looking at an exhibition about identity and belonging. One quote on the wall particularly resonated. "Sometimes you have to lose yourself to find yourself, and sometimes you have to leave home to understand what home really means." The flight back to Chicago gave me time to process everything I'd experienced and learned. The journal I'd started was now filled with observations, insights, and plans, not just for immediate changes, but for the life I wanted to build going forward. A life where my happiness wasn't contingent on other people's choices or approval. My apartment felt different when I returned, simultaneously familiar and slightly foreign. Instead of simply returning to old routines, I made intentional changes. I rearranged furniture, hung photographs from my New Zealand adventure, and created a meditation corner inspired by those peaceful moments by Lake Wanaka. At work, colleagues immediately noticed the difference. "Whatever that vacation did for you should be prescribed by doctors," Jessica said after I presented innovative ideas for 3 different client campaigns. "You seem, I don't know, more centered? More confident." I threw myself into work with renewed creativity but also maintained healthier boundaries. No more working weekends unless absolutely necessary. No more checking emails after 8 p.m. I used my evenings to explore photography classes inspired by New Zealand's landscapes, joined a hiking club, and even started dating again, something I'd neglected while trying to maintain one-sided relationships. Charlotte returned from her honeymoon 3 weeks after I came home. Her text was tentative, unlike her usual casual approach. "I know I have a lot to apologize for. Can we meet for coffee? I miss my sister terribly." We arranged to meet at a neutral cafe in Lincoln Park, close to my apartment. I arrived early, choosing a quiet corner table and ordering my usual lavender latte to calm my nerves. When Charlotte walked in, I was struck by how tired she looked despite her recent honeymoon tan. She seemed smaller somehow, less confident than the polished version of herself she'd become with Marcus. "You look amazing," she said after an awkward hug. "Really different. Refreshed?" New Zealand was exactly what I needed, I replied simply. She nodded, fidgeting with her wedding ring, a massive diamond that seemed too large for her delicate hands. "Emma, I owe you a huge apology. About the wedding, about everything that led up to it. What I did was unforgivable." "Why did you do it?" I asked directly. "I need to understand what happened between us." Charlotte took a shaky breath. "Marcus's family has very strong opinions about social circles and who belongs where. His mother made it clear that she thought you didn't fit with the caliber of guests they wanted. She said things about your business, your apartment, your lifestyle that made me feel like I had to choose." "And you chose them," I said quietly. "I chose wrong," she said, tears forming in her eyes. I was so desperate to fit into Marcus's world that I lost sight of who I really am and what actually matters. The wedding felt hollow without you there. I kept looking for you during the ceremony, during photos, during the reception. It wasn't the day I dreamed of. I appreciated her honesty, but I wasn't ready to simply forgive and forget. "Charlotte, this isn't just about the wedding. It's about years of pulling away, of making me feel like I wasn't good enough for your new life. That hurt long before the wedding invitation never came." She didn't deny it. "I know. I got so caught up in being who I thought Marcus wanted that I stopped being myself. And I stopped valuing the people who loved me for who I really was. The question is," I said carefully, "who are you now? Are you the sister I grew up with? Or Are you Marcus's wife who occasionally remembers she has a sister? The directness of my question seemed to surprise her. The old Emma would have accepted her apology, without conditions, grateful for any acknowledgement of wrongdoing. The new Emma understood her worth too clearly for that. I want to be your sister again, she said earnestly. I want to remember who Charlotte Carter is, not just who Charlotte Morrison thinks she should be. She'd taken Marcus's last name, something that hadn't occurred to me until that moment. That's going to require more than apologies, I said. It's going to require consistent actions that show you value our relationship, even when it's inconvenient or when Marcus's family disapproves. We talked for nearly 3 hours, addressing years of accumulated hurt and misunderstanding. Charlotte revealed the pressure she'd been under from Marcus's family to distance herself from anyone they deemed inappropriate, including me. She admitted to feeling trapped between trying to fit into their world and maintaining her authentic relationships. I shared how her gradual withdrawal had affected me, how being excluded from the wedding had forced me to reevaluate my entire approach to relationships and self-worth. I told her about New Zealand, about the people I'd met who'd chosen authenticity over approval, about the clarity I'd gained through solo travel and reflection. There were no magical resolutions or tearful reconciliations, just two sisters tentatively trying to bridge a gap that had grown wider than either had realized. Charlotte expressed genuine interest in my business growth, my New Zealand adventure, and my future plans. For the first time in years, she asked about my life without relating it back to Marcus or his world. As winter turned to spring, Charlotte made consistent efforts to rebuild our relationship. Weekly coffee dates, text check-ins that weren't related to family obligations, and even lunch meetings where Marcus wasn't the primary topic of conversation. She began asserting herself more in her marriage, insisting on maintaining relationships that Marcus's family didn't approve of. The progress wasn't linear. There were setbacks when Marcus's family influence reasserted itself, moments when Charlotte slipped back into prioritizing their approval over authentic connections. But she caught herself more quickly each time and made efforts to course-correct. Easter brought our first family gathering since the wedding, held at our mother's house with Charlotte and Marcus attending. The potential for awkwardness was significant, but I arrived centered after a morning yoga session and determined to focus on gratitude rather than lingering resentment. Marcus's behavior toward me had notably improved, though I suspected this was due to Charlotte's behind-the-scenes conversations rather than any genuine change of heart. He asked polite questions about my business and even complimented a marketing campaign I'd mentioned. Small gestures, but meaningful in the context of our previous interactions. As we cleaned up after dinner, Charlotte found me alone in the kitchen. "Thank you for being here," she said simply. "For giving us another chance." "I'm glad you're making the effort," I replied honestly. Though I almost didn't come. I had an invitation to visit Klaus in Germany. He's starting a tech company and wanted marketing consulting help. "Klaus from New Zealand?" Charlotte asked, showing genuine interest. "You've stayed in touch with the people you met traveling?" I nodded, showing her recent photos Klaus had sent from Berlin, along with messages from Yuki in Tokyo and Anna in Vancouver. "We're actually planning a reunion trip to Japan next fall. Yuki's going to show us around." "That sounds incredible," Charlotte said, and I detected no judgment, only perhaps a hint of envy. "You've built quite an international network while I was busy trying to fit into country club culture." "I had to," I said honestly. I couldn't keep waiting for my happiness to depend on our relationship being repaired. She absorbed this with surprising grace. "I understand that now. I'm just grateful you're willing to let me try to be part of your life again." Later that evening, as I prepared for bed in my apartment, I looked at a wall display I'd created featuring photos from New Zealand alongside images of my growing local friendships and business achievements. At the center was a framed quote I'd found in Wellington: "The best revenge is a life well lived." The exclusion that had once devastated me had ultimately given me an unexpected gift. It had forced me to discover who Emma Carter was beyond being Charlotte's little sister, beyond familiar patterns and comfortable limitations. In losing what I thought was essential to my identity, I had found something more valuable: my independent self. My phone buzzed with a text from Charlotte. "Loved seeing your travel photos today. You're inspiring me to be braver about choosing adventure over approval. Maybe you could help me plan a sister's trip soon? The message made me smile. The sister, who had once made me feel dispensable, was now seeking my guidance on how to prioritize authenticity over acceptance. The dynamic between us was shifting in ways I couldn't have imagined a year ago. As I turned off the lights, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. The painful exclusion had taught me that family isn't just what we're born into, but what we choose to nurture and maintain. Some relationships survive because of unconditional love. Others require boundaries and mutual respect to thrive. Charlotte would always be my sister, but she was no longer the primary source of my identity or happiness. The uninvitation that once felt like the end of everything had actually been the beginning of my most authentic life.
So what about you?
Have you ever experienced a painful rejection that ultimately led to unexpected growth? Have you had to set boundaries with family members who took your relationship for granted? Share your stories in the comments below, and if this journey resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and like this video. Remember, sometimes the most painful exclusions can lead to the most beautiful discoveries about yourself. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and until next time, keep choosing authenticity over approval, no matter how much it costs you.